Hello, reading friend, and thanks for joining me for another book chat. Today, let's spend some time with War in Heaven by Charles Williams. This book was originally published back in 1930, and I read a 2015 electronic edition published by Open Road Integrated Media. So, War in Heaven by Charles Williams. I decided to read this because last year I read Descent into Hell by Charles Williams, and I wanted to read something else by him, so I chose this one. And this one is basically a Grail story, a supernatural, sort of a supernatural fantasy or a theological thriller. So yeah, this one was a little different than Descent into Hell. Of the two, I probably preferred Descent into Hell just because Descent into Hell had a creepy doppelganger in it, which I thought was fun. But anyway, this one was kind of a page turner too, because who doesn't like a good versus evil story, which is basically what this is. So this book, what it's about, so it has this really cool opening line. The telephone bell was ringing wildly, but without results, since there was no one in the room but the corpse. I love that. So it starts out with this corpse in a room, in an office, actually, it turns out to be, of a publishing house. And this is where the story sort of kicks off, in this publishing house in London. And this person found dead under the desk of this other guy, this man's office. No one knows who he is. He doesn't have any tie to the publishing house. The owner of the office had been out of the office when just sort of a relatively kind of brief time, I think. And so that's kind of a mystery. So we have that going on right at the very beginning. But then we have this character whose name is Julian Davenport. He's the archdeacon of, it's called Castra Parvulorum. And it's actually in this village of Fartles. And anyway, he's written this book called The Christianity and the League of Nations, that he's seeking to get this book published. And so he comes to this publishing house eventually, and to talk to them about publishing the book. And while he's there, there's another book getting published. Obviously, it's a publishing house. They're publishing lots of things. This is by a man named Sir Giles, and this is all about the history of the Grail. Anyway, around about way, he gets to look at a proof of that book, before, and then later on it's edited to remove this one particular piece, but the archdeacon actually gets to see it, and the conclusion was that the Grail, the Holy Grail, is in this parish, this small country church in England called Fartles, which is none other than the archdeacon's church. So, kind of a coincidence there, but that's where we kick off our Grail story. So, then there ensues sort of a struggle to possess the Grail. The archdeacon eventually goes back to the church and starts to look for it. And then there are other forces that have now found out where the Grail might be, and they want it. So they also start trying to get it. So that's the struggle, right? Kind of a good versus evil. And then sort of the forces align. So some people working for the side of the good, and some, namely the archdeacon, among others that sort of come around him eventually. And then the forces of evil that I won't describe here, because I'm not going to give away any kind of like spoilers really. But so, yeah, the characters to me sort of represented different aspects of people, right? The archdeacon's kind of like the good, kind of like the kind of a good example of a human, and the person who's mainly after the Grail is basically satanic, and he's obviously kind of the version of evil that's after the Grail. Sir Giles is really the one who wrote the book about the history of the Grail. He's he's an atheist, so he doesn't have any values at all. And so he basically kind of like could align, either way, but ultimately he does align with the evil. He's arrogant and he's very selfish, and so whatever he just selfishly wants, that's what he does, because he doesn't really have any kind of like values. There's a quote here though about the kind of the good versus evil, and where Charles Williams is coming from with this. So let me just see if I can pull that up, because I thought it was really kind of interesting, because evil we think of a lot of times as kind of like an outside force, and this, from the introduction of the book, there's an introduction, and this is not what apparently Charles Williams thought. By the way, I didn't mention Charles Williams was one of the Inklings, the kind of the literary group that formed kind of in the middle of the century, early in the century, 20th century, with C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien and a few others. So he was in that sort of group. But it says, in other words, evil isn't the opposite of good, as many suppose. Rather, it's a parasite that only seeks to negate the good. Goodness doesn't try to possess or control people. It doesn't seek to destroy all things. Real goodness, grounded in love, seeks out growth and freedom. If we want to be good, Williams believes, we must not grasp. The more we grasp, the more we try to possess. The more we possess, the more we destroy. True freedom comes when we hold all things with an open hand. In the story, the archdeacon realizes this ideal applies to all of life, even if it means sacrificing the Grail itself to the enemy. So, yeah, the sort of the enemy, the sort of the villain, the arch sort of evil person in this book, is a person who really just enjoys destroying things, destroying people, destroying things around him. This is what he wants to do. And in Charles Williams' view, apparently this would be sort of the definition of evil. And the other sort of interesting thing that I think around this was that the Grail can be used for good or for evil, but the archdeacon realizes that it's not the Grail so much, although the Grail has a certain energy, as we see in the book, but it's the important thing is, to stay good. If you start, you can't be bad to make yourself good. So if you do the wrong thing in the name of good, you're no longer really good, right? And so he understands that it will all work out as long as he can stay on that sort of true path. And then ultimately, to join this little band of people doing good is the ultimate and the true protector of the Grail appears, from the legend. I can't think of his name offhand, and I didn't write it down, but he appears as well. And so there's a lot of supernatural stuff that goes on. There's a little kid, Adrian, and there's another quote here that I wanted to read because this really struck me as kind of funny, but the evil person actually has really evil designs on Adrian, and it's basically human sacrifice. But I just wanted to read this from the parents because I thought it was so kind of interesting, because this book was written in 1930, and how we might not view, parents might not view this kind of thing the same way today as they did in 1930. So let me just find that quote real quick. That's a secret game, isn't it, Adrian? They're talking in front of the parents. Gregory is the evil guy. That's a secret game, isn't it, Adrian? Adrian's the kid. Gregory answered merrily, "Our secret game, isn't it, Adrian?" "It's hidden," Adrian said seriously. "It's hidden pictures. But you mustn't know what, Mommy. Must she?" He appealed to Gregory. "Certainly not," Gregory said. "Certainly not," Adrian repeated. "They're my hidden pictures." So they shall be, darling," Barbara said, the mother. "Please forgive me, well, Mr. Persimmons, I suppose we ought to get going. Thank you for a charming afternoon." "Hello, red flag, Mother." There's several instances like this, like the parents are kind of like clueless, but I think they kind of represent, in this sense, they represent kind of like the general public, like just kind of like people that don't realize that these sort of forces are at work in the world, and so they're kind of clueless about it. And but today, you know, those kind of things like, oh yeah, this middle-aged man that we just met and my son have secret pictures, and they're not going to show me or tell me what they're about. You're like, yeah. Anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. Kind of the other thing is that there's this apothecary shop where all the sort of occult knowledge rests. It's an apothecary shop in London, and is run by a Greek guy, and then there's a Jewish guy too. So I thought this was also kind of interesting that, the East is where they're all going to go eventually, the East, because this is sort of where the hidden knowledge is, and that can be used for these kind of purposes. And I thought that was really interesting. Anyway, all right. So yeah, I did enjoy this. This was kind of, had its moments of being kind of a real page turner in a sense of what was exactly going to happen. There's some magical elements to it. Well, not magical, but supernatural elements to it, creating fog and, the satanic rituals and things like that, from this sort of perspective, sort of theological kind of perspective. So I will stop the chat there. My next chat is going to be 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. I have read this previously, but I decided to give it a reread so I could chat it, and that chat will be coming up fairly soon. So until next time, take care.